I thought this was the same quote, but maybe it's a different Chomsky quote where he says, in America, we don't need censorship because you don't have to tell people not to say something because they're not allowed to think it.
Welcome to We Flew Off the Page. I'm Mohammed Seven, and I'm here to do my very favorite thing in the world, talk to great songwriters about how they do what they do. Each episode, we'll dive into the little details of two of my guests' songs, which I'll play for you. The songwriter has chosen one of their songs, and I have agonized over and selected the other from their catalog of wonderful music. This week's episode is brought to you by the 5 different kinds of loading for a gig. First kind of loading is loading up, where you pack the car with all your gear. Second is loading in, where you bring all your gear into the venue and set it up. The third kind is loading out, where you take all your carefully set up gear and pack it back into your car. Fourth kind is unloading, where you take all your crap and put it away at home, or in my case, leave it lying around the hallway for days for my wife and son to trip over and then put it away. And the final phase is uploading, because if you don't post a photo to Instagram and show the world that you had an awesome gig, did it really happen? Thank you to the 5 kinds of loading for sponsoring today's show. You're a pain in the butt, but without you, most of us songwriters couldn't make rent. Speaking of gigs, we used to go to a live show and show an artist love by buying their album for $15 or $20. Now, $10 a month gets you every album ever made through streaming. How does that math work? Well, it doesn't. It means that all music is now basically free, and independent artists are having to find other ways to make a living. For many of us, that includes crowdfunding in an odd and wonderful world called Patreon. If you feel like you can live in a world without local independent artists, then Patreon might not be for you. But if independent music makes your life better, if you like what I do on the podcast and on records, you can consider supporting my work on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Or if you think of another artist who brings sunshine to your life, and you could see if they have a Patreon. Most of us do at this point. And spoiler alert, my guest today has a great one that you can find in the show notes. You can find my Patreon at patreon.com/Mohammed7, also in the show notes. And lastly, we're still a new podcast here at We Flew Off the Page. We're small but mighty, and it'll help a lot if you can review the show on Apple Podcasts. If you do, I might read your review at the end of the show. Lastly, you could share We Flew Off the Page with a friend. Win my undying gratitude. Now, who doesn't want that? My guest today is Carsie Blanton. Carsie is a songwriter with hooks, chutzpah, and revolutionary optimism. Inspired by artist activists including Nina Simone and Woody Guthrie, her catalog careens through American popular song, from folk and swing to pop-punk protest anthems. With her unique mix of humor, soul, and political wit, and 15-plus years on the road, Carsie has amassed a dedicated fan base and a small menagerie of viral hits, including Rich People, Shit List, and Fishin' With You. Her new album, After the Revolution, produced by Grammy winner Tyler Chester, just dropped yesterday, March 21st, and is hot off the presses. Carsie Blanton, welcome to We Flew Off the Page.
Thank you so much for having me. Thrilled to be here.
Well, I forget where I heard you say this. I'm getting right into it now. Here, Carsie. Oh, actually, before we get into it, I'm going to have a sip of my tea, and I'm going to ask you, what kind of tea are you drinking, since we're having a conversation over tea?
Well, I'm drinking oolong, and I'm glad you're pausing because I wanted to just compliment you on the 5 kinds of load-in. That's a great sponsor.
I thought so.
We have a kind of we have a nickname for one kind of load in, which is when you load in and there's like you don't have very much gear and there's no stairs. We call that a poet's load in.
Ooh.
Because I assume if you're a poet and you go to a gig, you just bring like your notebook, right?
Wow. First of all, only a poet could have given this such a gorgeous name. That is so great. So I have a thing on this show that I call the We Flew Off the Page lexicon. It's when I collect a new phrase or, idea like that. And it's been a couple episodes since I had a solid entry. Poets load in, I am keeping that.
Good. I don't think I made that up and I can't remember who did. So kudos to whoever did.
Indeed. I'll take it. So I forgot where I heard you say this. It was on another podcast. I think I've listened to 4 of your past interviews so far. And I'll link to those in the show notes for folks who want to catch up on other Carsie Blanton interviews. But you have called for a massive people's movement to change all of society. You said, we need artists to step up and create the right emotional tone for people to feel enrolled in that project. And I really liked that. Reminds me of a bit of the Emma Goldman quote, if I can't dance, I don't want to be a part of your revolution. Um, I also I also think about songwriting in terms of trying to find the right emotional tone for people to feel inspired to be a part of something exciting. I'm not that good at, making the revolution fun, if you will, in my music, and I think you're very good at that.
Oh, thank you. That warms my heart.
How do you tap into that particular muse?
Well, I've been on a political journey this past decade or so, as I think a lot of people have. People loosely in my generation, I'm like an elder millennial, and it seems like there's sort of a sea change happening among this cohort where about start like before Trump got elected, I would say I was like a liberal Democrat, like fairly progressive, but really identified as a Democrat. And after Trump and then the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter protests and now Gaza and all the various other events that have happened the last decade, I've found myself pretty divested in the American empire as a political project. And I now feel much more related to the people all over the world who are being exploited and oppressed by that empire. And so, having made that journey, it included lots of heartache and grief, and also reading a lot of books and going to a lot of classes and becoming an organizer myself. But one thing that has happened is as my paradigm shifted around it and it started to feel more real to me and more present, the new political ideas I was finding, I was able to find the beauty in them and the symbolism in them, and that's when they became available to me as a songwriter. So it feels like there's almost a lag on it. Like when I first started to become a socialist, it felt really theoretical. And then as I actually kind of lived it and organized and read more and learned more about it, it started to feel like part of my heart and soul. And that's when it made its way into my work.
Oh, that's so interesting. You don't often hear people talk about the beauty and the symbolism in in revolution, in radical liberation. And
Yeah.
there's
Well, and
there's
if they
so
do talk about it, it doesn't often get reported here in the US. So that was part of the journey, I think, was finding not only artists but also revolutionary writers from different, countries and parts of history who spoke about this. Like Che Guevara said famously, every revolutionary is guided by a great feeling of love.
ooh,
And I have really found that to be the case, but it's like it takes some time to unlearn everything you thought you knew before you can get to where it really lands that way.
wow, that's so gorgeous. It's interesting. To that end, I wasn't going to bring this up because I have so many questions. I wanted to. I was trying to rein myself in, but now I can't help it. Since you've mentioned it, I learned from a mini documentary on YouTube, which everybody should watch. It's called Carsie Blanton on Palestine.
Oh.
That this actually is not about the things that you said about Palestine, though you've taken powerful stands and have been very vocal about the violence in Gaza. But you mentioned in that documentary that in your live set you're covering a Dolores Keane song, "The Island," which it sounds
Oh,
like you discovered it from Paul Brady.
wait, Paul Brady didn't write that song?
No, Dolores Keane did. Yeah,
What?
yeah, also an Irish woman.
You're
Eh,
blowing my mind right now because I was doing it in Ireland. No one mentioned this to me.
Oh, that's funny.
Maybe
It's
that's why Paul Brady hasn't gotten back because we like emailed to be like, is it okay to release this? And like no one ever responded. Maybe
oh,
it's not his
interesting.
song.
What?
Okay, well, I gotta write that down real quick. Dolores Clean. Okay.
Yes. So I checked, and I'm pretty sure that's right. Of course, I could be wrong. Maybe I somehow made, read it wrong. But
Amazing.
so I know that song from a 1992 compilation of Irish female artists called "A Woman's Heart," which is,
Wow.
if you can bear the like kind of cheesy late 80s overproduction,
Yeah.
It's an incredible album, an incredible liberation album.
Cool.
Both in terms of women's liberation and broader human liberation. But anyway, it was interesting, as I've been diving into your interviews, trying to sort of get a sense for how you think about songwriting, and also just listening to your songs and trying to sort of guess myself at how you approach things. It was interesting to look at this song, which I was noticing some of the similarity, the way that in this song, once again, it's called "The Island," how it's unexpected. It's like there aren't a lot of protest songs that do quite what she did here. She starts out talking about sort of the hard things that are happening in the world,
Hmm.
and then she sort of makes this odd but lovely segue into how she's singing to her lover, I want to be with you on this island and I can't remember the words off the top of my head, but, put our feet in the
Yeah.
sand, and in the evening when the sun goes down, make love to the sound of the ocean.
Yeah.
It's such a graceful but striking juxtaposition of not
Yes.
shying away from real things. In no uncertain terms, does she describe the things that were happening at that moment in the political life of the world. And then she's saying, we're going to have it both. We will address
Yeah.
these things and change them and not forget our humanity. And I feel like I
Yes.
see a lot of that. I see that in almost all of your work, honestly.
Oh, thank you. Gosh, what a lovely compliment and a beautiful observation. And that's actually something that struck me about the song as well when I first heard it. Because I only found that song, The Island, in October. So when we were sort of going through, seeing how the Israeli government was going to respond to the October 7th event. And so I found that song, and I already had written After the Revolution, and the album was made and everything, and the song did something that I was trying to do with my song After the Revolution, which we'll talk about later, I presume,
Mm-hmm. Sure
which
will.
is try to reflect that when there's a political event happening in the world, especially when it's not happening to you,
Mm.
it creates almost a double consciousness where we understand what's happening. Like right now, we understand what's happening in Gaza, and we're learning about it. We're seeing it on our feeds. We know that every day there's like new developments, and that lies heavy on our heart. Yet at the same time, we have to do our job and be with our family and navigate our relationships, and also like change diapers and do the dishes and like go
Right.
to the store to buy milk, and it's very awkward and also like heartbreaking in a way because you can't actually stop everything in your life because of Gaza. I mean, some people have, and especially people whose lives have been lost.
Mm-hmm.
But being here, like in the middle of the empire, we can protest and we can write about it and we can post and we can do everything we can think of. But at the end of the day, you still also have to do your daily activities. So I think trying to reflect that the personal and the political are not actually separate, but are in fact happening together all the time, is
Right.
something that I'm really interested in as a songwriter. So when I heard that song, that was my first thought was, oh, here's one of those songs. And also that in a way, like when the political world becomes too heavy, we need to be able to escape into our personal world.
Mm.
Because we can't be political animals 100% of the time because it's just too exhausting.
Right.
And that's another beautiful thing in that song is she describes the war in Lebanon. This song was written in the 80s.
Right.
Skies of Lebanon are burning, and women and children are dying, and it's really heavy. And then it's, hey, don't listen to me. This wasn't meant to be a sad song.
Right.
I want to
Right.
take you to the island. Make love to the sound of the ocean. That's just that to me is so sounds so much like my real life.
Yeah.
I feel both those things a lot of the time.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have been assuming that part of why your music is so effective is because you're writing your real experience
Mm.
and have created a life around these, both radical and delightful things that you write about. So, I mean, what a model, it's like, I think this is one of the most important ways to lead, right? Is to show
Mm.
people that you can have a life that you really enjoy where you're
Yeah.
doing important things. And I feel like that's something you do.
Yeah. Good. I'm actually, as part of one of the organizing teams that I'm on, we have like an internal catchphrase, which is making socialism cool and hot.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
I think it's an important part of organizing too. It's like most people will not be enrolled politically because they feel like they should. They're going to
Totally,
be enrolled because it's fun and sexy.
totally. I love it. Um, I once heard Noam Chomsky speak about how we communicate about important issues. And he said that in totalitarian regimes, like, for example, Iran, where my family's from, people know it's not safe to speak your mind in public. So in public, you repeat the party lines. But in the privacy of your home, you can tell your close family and friends what you really think. He said, whereas in the advanced capitalist countries like the United States, there is only the party line. He said, here the party line is like the air we breathe. If you try to address our real collective interests publicly, you're made to feel like you're inventing conspiracies. People say, what are you even talking about? Um, anyhow, you
Yeah,
make,
is that sorry to interrupt, but I thought this was the same quote, but maybe it's a different Chomsky quote where he says, "In America, we don't need censorship because you don't have to tell people not to say something because they're not allowed to think it."
oh, wow.
And I thought that was really well described. Like we have a different version of state censorship where you can say whatever you want, but you can only think certain things.
Well, that's really interesting. I think that cuts more to the heart of what he said. My quote is just from my memory of hearing him say it.
Yeah.
I really like the way you said it there. Yeah, exactly. This is exactly what he was trying to communicate. But anyway, you make such a clear effort to speak, to all people, to unify us in a conversation. Your songs are lovingly crafted to reach both people who agree with you already and people who literally spew hatred at you. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on, drawing our human family into a dialogue about our real collective interests. How do you think about sort of locating a conversation, and how do you think about, this as a songwriter?
Whew, that's a big question. I do think about locating that conversation. The way it comes up for me most often is when I'm posting something to the internet because, like, I do live shows, but my shows tend to be rooms full of people who agree with me already. And so when I post a song to the internet is usually when I'm having that thought process, like, okay, what are the words of this song? How am I framing it? And if it gets to someone who's on the so-called opposite side of the political spectrum, how's it going to hit them? And so I try to use tools for disarming. Humor is my main one. I find that humor, if something is funny, it changes people's ability to listen to what comes next. So if you're laughing, you don't have your defenses up to whatever the next idea is. So one of my main tricks as a songwriter is like joke, 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 reality. And then by the time reality hits, it's like you're open, and so it hits you differently than it would if you just said reality, reality, reality.
Oh my
But
God.
the other thing is just that I try to keep in mind that so many of the political battles you see sort of in mainstream news are not the real political battles. They're sort of the
Right.
cover story for the political drama or really the distraction from the real political drama. So like what we would call culture wars. There's constant news about like, what did this senator say about trans bathrooms? And then what did this senator say about January 6th and whether it was an insurrection, whatever. And that all of that theater is distracting not only Congress, but also every American from the real drama of politics and the real drama of climate change and
Right.
capitalism, all the real dramas that affect all of our lives and our futures. And I think if you can find ways to kind of poke through the culture wars or even just make fun of them,
Right.
that it is also disarming. It's disarming to people all the way across the political spectrum, too, because I think most of us experience that as an annoying distraction and not our real interest and concern.
Right. Oh, that is all so interesting. Yeah, during the Trump presidency, one of the ways I thought about it was it seemed to me like it was sort of 5% fire and 95% smoke. And
Yeah.
the smoke was so upsetting to, so many of us that it was impossible to not pay attention to it. But it was
Yeah.
smoke, like the fire needed attention and the smoke
Yes.
really didn't.
Yes.
And there was this phrase that sort of guided me it was sort of my albatross, my guiding star, which was something Jay-Z said in a song. Um, and it's an odd thing. It seems not connected, but Jay-Z says in a song, I ain't looking at you rappers, I'm looking past you.
Yeah.
And this is brag talk, but he's saying something really brilliant, I think, which
Yeah.
is, all of this drama in my face is not good for me in my life, and I'm going to
Yeah.
look past it. And I tried to, for myself, approach the Trump era in that way. It's like
Yes.
I'm not going to look at this, just the endless upsets that
Yeah.
you are creating. I'm going to look
Yeah.
past that to the bigger picture if I can. And I didn't feel like I had a tremendous amount of success, but I liked it as a direction.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about a similar concept recently because it's an election year.
Yeah, right. Speaking
And
of
a
Trump.
very upsetting one, I'm sure, in many ways. I mean, it already is.
Already.
And I think now that I'm part of a movement that is organizing in a more long-term way, I have like better tricks for tabling the daily theater of the election, because ultimately, to most of the people, to most of the real political dramas, like the real problems we need to resolve, the changing of an American president is not going to be the difference-making thing.
Right.
And also, I feel so full of rage at the Democratic Party that it's hard for me to root for them, rah rah, the way that I once did.
Totally.
So that's taken a little bit of the juice out of the the Coliseum game that happens every 4 years. I used to be like, I'm team this and you're team that, and now I'm kind of like, these guys are all going to destroy the entire world if we let them keep going. So I'm not really on either team at this point. But yeah, just in terms, what I was trying to get to is like, there is a longer game of politics, and it's happening all the time, every day, every year, in every place in the world.
Yes.
And if you can kind of keep that kind of broad perspective on politics and not get caught up in the, little battles we do every 4 years, I find it a little less anxiety provoking.
Absolutely, and I feel like we share a similar perspective on the way forward, which is the people's movement of
Yeah.
probably many different kinds, but back to the thing you started out with about your songwriting, this formula that you like to use of joke, joke, joke. What was it? Truth after that, or I forget what the last
I
part is.
forget what I said.
But
too.
whatever
That's
you said,
good though.
but what a brilliant way to think about communicating important ideas to people who are not members of the choir. You're not preaching to the choir here. What an incredibly useful thing to be doing, and I thank you for sharing this priceless tidbit with me and the listeners. It's like I think we can all try and learn from the way that you do it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I learned it from John Prine, just so we gave credit where credit is due.
There you go.
He's the master of a joke, 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 truth lyric.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I mean, I think you've taken what he did and you're doing it in a pretty different way. I mean, a more explicit, to me, in my mind, a more explicitly revolutionary way. Not to devalue what he did, but to give
Thank
credit
you,
to what you've done and how fresh it is.
Thanks.
I discovered your music about 4 years ago. A friend told me I had to listen to you, and I started, as so many of us do these days, with your most popular song on Spotify, which at the time was Jacket.
Oh, wow. Okay. Cool.
For those who've never heard Jacket by Carsie Blanton, you should listen. It's delightful and hilarious. A tale, I think, of a female sexual agency is at least a big part of it.
Oh, I love that. Sure. Great.
Anyhow, that was my introduction to you. I was all in on Jacket, and listening to that and songs like Loving Is Easy started me down a road thinking about my own music and how I think ultimately scared I am to involve my own sexuality in my work. For me as a man, I'm always trying to be aware of the pitfalls of sexual exploitation and not wanting to profit off of sexism in my work. So I think it keeps me scared to really embrace my authentic sexuality creatively. And you've inspired me to want to push my limits there.
Cool.
What you do feels authentic to me, in that realm, and it also feels gutsy and vulnerable. You've said in a great social media reel that your recipe for a good song is hooks, humor, sex, and soul. which actually I teach songwriting at my local library, and
Oh, cool.
I played them that reel once. It was fun to get to talk about.
Oh, cool.
Anyway, I still haven't figured out what my version of it is, but it's been fun to work on it. And I'm curious how you think about yourself, as a sexual person vis-a-vis your work.
Well, it's been an interesting journey. I've always been pretty slutty, so it's like I think sexuality has always been a big part of my life, and more specifically, I think that for me, like what I would call eros, like the sort of erotic romantic force, is really related to my creative force. So when I'm like turned on and falling in love, I'm very likely also working on a song. That's the time I feel the most excited to write a song. Typically, historically. Now that has changed a little bit as I've aged. I'm now 38, so I don't know if it's literally age or if it's kind of the different phase that I'm in with politics. But in some ways, my work as an organizer and my passion for politics has like supplanted my interest in writing about eros, or like it's almost like eros has moved for me into politics. Weirdly.
Huh. Sure. Right, you've laid some of that out already, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
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 Just like
so,
in terms of making the revolution, like fun
yes.
and sexy, and
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
the connection I drew just now.
Yeah. Okay. Good. It's also funny, just like so. I'll give a little more backstory on this or a little more context in a second. But I also I used to exclusively be attracted to musicians, and now I'm exclusively attracted to political organizers. So it's always like that's the bellwether right there. So the other element worth talking about is that I'm in an open marriage and have been for 17 years now. Wow. So I have a little bit of a outsider perspective on sort of romantic relationships as they are understood in the mainstream, and I think for me that has made it more fun to write about because it sort of allows me to like be a little bit punk rock and a little bit rebel, which I think has always been part of my artistic voice.
Yeah.
So I've tried to write love songs and like lust songs that all have a little bit of something extra or a little bit of something weird or something from column C, So like Jacket, the chorus is I like your shirt, I like your jacket, I like to think about you when I whack it. And that was a little bit on purpose, wanting to bring like female masturbation into the world of pop songwriting.
Yeah.
Which actually since then it's gotten a lot more common.
Oh, that's interesting. Now that I think about it, yeah.
And I take full credit for that. No, I'm just kidding. Lil' Kim probably takes credit for that.
I think you can all take some credit.
Yeah, did that answer your question? I feel like that was like a circular answer.
No, it was a really good answer, actually. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
Hold on one second. I just have to shut this door. It's cold.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I'm back.
All right. So this show is about songwriting. I don't usually ask guests about their careers, but I have to ask you about your recent crowdfund because I think it's so cool that you managed to raise $117,354 with 2,288 supporters on Kickstarter for an album of explicitly revolutionary music. It's really amazing. Not only did you raise the money that you needed to make the record, you, as I'm quoting you from your website, blasted through 3 stretch goals and then decided to do some really creative and exciting things with the surplus cash. This is related to songwriting to me because I think for a lot of us, particularly those of us who are progressive or radical or protest songwriters, when we're writing a song, I think it can often be on our mind how being explicitly political, sometimes it feels like it guarantees the song to be small or the reach to be small or for there not be any funding or support for it. And I just feel like your whole career proves this wrong. But this most recent record blows that out of the water. So I'd love to, would you tell us a little bit about how you managed this impressive crowdfund and then just a few things about the extra things you're doing with the extra money?
Sure. So one thing about this crowdfund is that I did it through my own website. instead of through Kickstarter, which allowed us to just do a few tricky things. I say us, I'm mostly talking about me and my husband, who happens to be a web developer, which has been quite handy.
Oh, that's great.
For my whole career, really. Because like I said, we've been together 17 years, so he's kind of been there from the beginning. And so we put it on my own website, in part because we wanted to be able to run social media ads. And this is kind of like a dirty word, because I think we're all pretty annoyed by social media ads. But I've been experimenting over the last few months with running ads with a lot of revolutionary dog whistles in them.
Interesting.
To try and drive people to my songs. So the pre-sale was the most successful version of that, where I just said, like, listen, I'm making a record called After the Revolution. It's for revolutionaries. I'm a protest singer. Don't you think there needs to be more protest music? And the response was, like, insane. Like, so not a ton, I don't know, maybe 25% of the backers came from those ads.
That's a lot still, I think.
It is a lot, yeah. So a lot of them were already fans, but I think what I wanted to point out is that we're in this special moment where there is actually a hunger for revolutionary art. And as much as I hate capitalism, I always want to reach more people, especially people who are looking for this kind of music. And so
totally.
I'm using the tools at hand, which right now are like meta ads. So that drove a bunch of people to the crowdfund. We also, because we did it on my website, we weren't splitting the money with Kickstarter, which takes 10% or something like that.
Brilliant.
So we ended up with all this extra money, and the final stretch goal was, so I did lots of things that I think we all want to do when we make an album. Like, I was able to go to a great studio and hire my favorite people, and then I was able to pay bonuses to the band as we went through stretch goals. Then
wow.
One
when
of the last stretch goals, I know, I was able to pay myself as a musician for the session, which I've never done before. And that was like, that blew my mind. I was like, I'm now paying myself the same amount I paid to my band, and I get to keep it. That was the first. But then the final stretch goal, we decided to send free copies of the record to activists and organizers. So we crowdfunded that and said, like, use this form and tell us about some organization that you think is doing revolutionary work and you find it inspiring. And we got all these submissions, and now we're in the process of emailing all those people and saying, like, how many volunteers would want, a CD or a vinyl record of this new album? And so that is twofold, because I want to be honest with you. Part of it is I would really like for my fans and my crowd to be made up of organizers and activists, because I really am writing the songs for them.
Yep.
And right now it's a little bit split. My crowd is it's various different people from various different places, and I find when we get to play for activists, it's like so exciting and so inspiring to us as a band. So I do want those people to hear my music selfishly. And then the other thing is, because I've made it for them, I really just want to give it to them. And say, like, look, I wrote you this song after the revolution. I hope that you sing it to your spouse when you have a fight about capitalism.
That's awesome. You left out, I read on your website, you're sending them copies of the album and chocolate.
Oh, yeah, and chocolate.
Okay, to me, this is such a brilliant, it's like, who needs a little sweetness in their life more than fucking underpaid, right? Overworked.
Yes. Yeah, I'm also writing them thank you notes, which I didn't say that in the thing, but I thought of it later. Like, I'm going to write little handwritten, like, you're doing good work, keep it up, buddy. Because, yeah, overworked, underpaid, and, like, living in an incredibly brutal political moment where it feels like nothing we do matters.
Yeah. What a cool overlap of, like, excellent organizing using, like you've been talking about this whole conversation, using sort of joyfulness and, and fun in the organizing, and overlap between that and building your career, which, like, they're not unrelated, right? It's like what you're doing is a good thing, and it helps other people do good things. It should be a cycle that feeds itself.
It should. It's starting to feel more that way. I got into therapy in the pandemic, and that was the main thing I was working on in therapy, was feeling like, okay, I'm becoming an organizer, but I'm a songwriter, and I've been a songwriter. I'm not going to stop being a songwriter. And so I had to do all this, like, self-work about how to kind of integrate. And I do feel like I'm getting a lot closer to it, where it feels like one project instead of two projects that are always competing for my time and energy.
Yeah. All right, a few more questions before we move on to listening to your songs. I told myself I wouldn't ask all of the questions that I had for you, but I think I'm just going to do it anyway.
Go for it. This is great. I'm enjoying it.
Oh, good, good. I'm so glad. So again, you've spoken openly about what's happening in Palestine and Israel. I'm wondering what it's like for you, I mean, in general, as a radical Jewish female songwriter.
Wow. I mean, it's like a lot of things. Do you mean what is it like to be speaking about Palestine, or like
You're
how do
welcome.
I relate to those identities?
You could answer it that way. I guess I more mean the latter. Sure. How do you relate to those identities? I guess I'm even more asking just what's it like for you? Like, what is your
Yeah.
experience as a Jewish woman who's doing
Okay.
what you do?
Sure. You know, that's been a journey as well. So my family is pretty weird, and I just preface that to say, like, I am Jewish because my mom is Jewish and I'm ethnically Jewish, but we weren't practicing, and we also my family is so has sort of created its own culture in so many ways. Like, so my mom's Jewish, my dad's like a redneck from Stanton, Virginia, and they raised me in almost like a personal growth cult because my dad's a therapist and writes books. So my house growing up was like a retreat center for people in therapy, basically.
Oh wow.
So that was my like quote unquote culture. And I just say that because I think, because Jewishness is both a religion and an ethnicity, it's a very complex experience. And so being an American Jew can mean a lot of different things.
Yep.
And I've noticed that even more over the past few months as it's become apparent to me that for many American Jews, Zionism is part of their upbringing and part of their identity. And for me, it was the furthest thing from my identity. Like, not only was it very rarely discussed, but like my grandpa was a socialist. And, it's just culturally, we related a lot more to the idea that, we're for the liberation of all people.
Hmm.
And so coming out and saying like free Palestine would never have upset anyone in my family, and it including after October 7th. So that's all just to give it a little context. Like, so I'm a Jewish woman and a radical songwriter. I'm also like from a long line of rednecks from Appalachia. And all of those things shaped who I am. And at the same time, the identity I feel the most related to is sort of twofold. I feel like an artist, and I feel like a socialist, basically. And what I mean by socialist is such a dry word, which I hate, but it's more like that Che Guevara quote about being guided by a great feeling of love. The revolutionary is guided by a great feeling of love. So I sort of am not very interested anymore in how each individual person identifies, and I'm much more interested in how we can build an international coalition of people working toward the future. All that is, having said all that, like, I've experienced anti-Semitism in my life, and I've experienced sexism in my life, and I think those experiences have informed me becoming a radical in many ways, because I have felt like an outsider, and I have felt like a member of an oppressed class. And I think that gave me a little window into what that would be like for someone else that I might not have had if I was just like classic white lady with money,
Yep.
Classic brand, original. So yeah,
It does.
is that good? Okay.
No, it's a great answer. I'll tack on a part two to the answer, which includes some of the things you've just said about having been raised in rural Virginia, where you were unschooled, which is kind of the progressive secular version of being homeschooled, more radical version. And I'm wondering, what impact that has had. Well, in particular, I guess I'm wondering what impact that's had on your songwriting.
Yeah. So yeah, being unschooled has been a major part of my life. I think that the way my family did it, unschooling meant you would come up with a project and try to figure out how to do it. So we had sort of like project-based learning in my household. So I'd be like, oh, tide pools are really cool. And then it'd be like, all right, we're going to figure out if you can recreate a tide pool in an aquarium in your house, or if we can like go talk to a marine biologist about tide pools, or like everything became sort of a big research project. And that has really informed the way I do my career, for sure.
Mm.
Has it informed my songwriting? Maybe in that I listen very widely. I'm a very curious person, and when I become interested in something, I do tend to do deep dives.
Mm.
And so my musical listening has been quite broad, and that started when I was pretty young. So I've had trouble kind of forcing myself into a genre because as a listener, there's a lot of genres of music that I've done pretty deep listening in. So when I go to write a song, I'm trying to write that idea in whatever genre is the best expression of it. And I'm not particularly interested in whether that's a folk song or a jazz standard or a punk song. Like it's neither here nor there to me. So I think in a way being good at doing research has helped me be a songwriter. Or hurt me, depending how you look at it.
Wow, what an interesting answer. That would never have occurred to me. All right, I'll rein myself in and stop asking this questions for this part of the segment of the show. We'll move on to listening to our first song of yours. It's the one I've chosen, and it's Twister from your 2019 album, Buck Up.
Well, it all went down when I heard him sing like a whiskey, it was wild and warm. Hey, the preacher preaching, the bells all ringing, and the rumble of a gathering storm. And when he took my hand, the wind blew strong. I said, put that down and back away slow. I've had about enough out of you now, mister. Well, I can't help you if you don't know. But if it ain't nailed down, we're gonna lose it in the twister. Turn tail, jump ship, hop on a train. You better run for you in a world of pain. I can hear it coming and we ain't even kissed it. If it ain't nailed down, we're gonna lose it in the twister. Well, I'm not sure he heard a word I said, or really if I said it at all. 'Cause the next I know I was in his bed with a window and a clock on the wall. And the clock stopped ticking and the sky went black. I said, good goddamn, now what have we done? We tried to beat the devil but we couldn't resist till we laid down when we should have turned and run. Now if it ain't nailed down, we're gonna lose it in the twister. Turn tail, jump ship, hop on a train. You better run for you in a world of pain. Can't beat the devil, so you got to resist. If it ain't nailed down, we're gonna lose it in the twister. Now I got a hole in the ground at a man. Now I got a man about town. So take it from the lady in the rubble and wreck. When you feel that feeling on the back of your neck, just turn tail, jump ship, hop on a train. You better run for you in the world of pain. Can't beat the devil, so you got to resist. If it ain't nailed down, you're gonna lose it. You're gonna have to turn tail, jump ship, hop on a train. You better run for you in a world of pain. I've sinned, but I never thought it end like this. If it ain't nailed down, I'm gonna lose it in the twister.
Again, that was Twister by my guest, Carsie Blanton. Okay, I have to say it was excruciating trying to pick a song of yours because I wanted to talk about so many of them. I felt very tempted to choose the song Hope from your new album, which everybody, you should all listen to it on YouTube first because the music video is amazing and it made me cry.
Aw, yay.
I was trying to choose a song that was pretty stylistically different than the song you have chosen that we'll listen to next. And I might have chosen Hope, which is also kind of a jazz standard. I wanted to choose Cool Kids from the new record, which I can't listen to enough. It is so much fun. I wanted to choose Loving is Easy, which I love. I wanted to choose Fishing with You, your tribute to John Prine. List goes on. This was difficult for me. I chose Twister partly because I wanted to showcase what felt to me like, again, a very different song than the protest anthem we'll listen to, but also because I find this song so impressive in terms of its pure artistry. You've crafted a flow of words that are fun to say, fun to hear. The song is rich on a purely aesthetic level. It starts out, well, it all went down when I heard him sing. Like whiskey, it was wild and warm. Heard the preacher preach and the bells all ring, then the rumble of a gathering storm. The alliteration is infectious. Well, went, whiskey, wild, warm. And then you give us preacher, preach, ring, rumble. Everything rolls off the tongue so effortlessly. And, almost like a rhyme. I feel like it delights the listener on an almost subconscious level.
Wow, it made me blush.
There's more, so brace yourself. I love this song and I have a lot to say. So then there's a wonderful tension between the title of the song, the metaphor of a twister, and the story of the song. The thesis of the song seems to be the high point of the chorus. If it ain't nailed down, we're going to lose it in a twister. Now, again, this song is so much fun that you don't actually need to do the work of figuring out exactly what it means in order to enjoy it. You can just sort of sing along to this bawdy sort of speakeasy story song and enjoy all the little twists and innuendos. But I also found it fun as the listener to try and figure out what you're really saying here. And for me, it wasn't obvious at first. It's a story where the narrator meets a singing man of some kind who she's drawn to, but knows no good can come of it. And then, when he takes her hand, God sends a warning and starts to blow wind and storm seemingly to advise you against making a big mistake. God saying, don't sleep with this guy. And by the second verse, you've both fallen into the age-old trap. You've given into temptation. To me, felt not dissimilar to the Adam and Eve story, although I feel like in your version, it's Adam who's the one who eats the apple.
Or Adam is the apple. Really.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way, but that makes sense. So anyway, at this point, all hell breaks loose. The clock stops ticking and the sky goes black. And then in the final part, which I couldn't tell, is it the bridge? Is it the last verse? I'm not sure. It's the part where the music drops out. You give us the result of all these bad decisions. You lost your home, you lost your stable relationship, and you're trying to save the next poor soul from making the same mistakes as you. Okay, I'll have a question in here eventually, but I'm gonna keep combing through.
This is great.
Oh, yeah. Good. Okay, so this brings us to the chorus. Turn tail, jump ship, hop on a train. You better run, boy, for you in a world of pain. I know you opened for Paul Simon, and in this part, I couldn't help but thinking of 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, where he gets to the chorus of "Step out the back, Jack, make a new plan, stand." What you've done here is pretty different, but it had a similar sensibility. And I loved the juxtaposition of phrases. I especially loved turn tail, which is not a phrase we hear very often. Okay, that was just a little side observation, but I enjoyed it. So then in the final chorus part, we get to, now I can hear it coming, and we ain't even kissed. If it ain't nailed down, we're going to lose it in the twister. So finally, the title and the central thesis of the song come together. This is how I interpreted it. You got to take a firm stand with yourself. Make a hard and fast decision not to do dumb stuff, or a tornado descends on your life and everything is thrown to the winds. You got to nail that shit down or you're going to lose it.
Yeah.
Is that around close to what you meant?
Definitely, like, beautiful interpretation of the song, and I feel very honored that you paid such attention to my lyrics. Wow. I get very picky not even picky when I'm writing lyrics, especially in a song like this that has a really distinct rhythm and is pretty repetitive melodically. I often feel like I'm working on a puzzle, like a 1,000-piece puzzle, and I'll get into almost a trance state, like, oh, we have this word and we have this phrase and we can move them around, and what if we had an internal rhyme? And it's like it's really fun to me. So I think fun is the driving force for me in writing a song like this. And it also, in the case of this song and some of my other work as well, I feel like it's descriptive rather than prescriptive. Pre or per? Prescriptive? Prescriptive? I'm not sure. Like a prescription, yeah, rather than prescriptive. In that I'm describing a thing that happened rather than dictating what should happen next time, or at least trying to. Although there's definitely the tone in this song is of advice. But it's sort of like advice to my former self. However, is it really? I don't think so. To me, there's sort of an undercurrent in the song of, it was a natural disaster. There was really nothing we could have done.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, I didn't catch that angle of it, but it's so smart.
And it is, this song is really is pretty direct, pulled from my life. And weirdly, when I listen to it now, because I hear what you're saying, and I'm like, oh, it's this kind of fun little narrative story. At the time of writing the song, I was like really in a dark place because I was living in New Orleans, which you can hear in the song, and with my husband, and I had fallen in love with my neighbor, who's a songwriter. And we were writing songs together, and it was like this very intense sort of musical and erotic connection that we had. And literally while this is going on, I'm at the house next door working on a song with my neighbor who I'm in love with. And a tornado hit New Orleans, which doesn't happen. This is real life. This really happened. God. and it landed. It hit ground about a block from our house, and it completely demolished a single house. Like it went, just smushed one house. God. And we're in the house working on a song when this happened. And I went outside, and the sky's all yellow, and I'm like, "What's that sound?" There's all these sirens. I go a block over, and the house has fallen down. And I think to myself, that was supposed to be my house. That was like God trying to smite me. because I'm clearly about to destroy my life. Like I could feel the energy of this twister gathering between me and this guy. This is about to destroy my life. And then that twister hit, and it was like, that's what it was. I'm gonna lose it in the twister. So I wish it was more metaphorical, but this song is almost word for word. This just happened to me.
Wow.
Yeah, but so I do want to get back to like alliterative wordplay, because that's one of my favorite things in life and as a songwriter. And I often think of this phrase that I read in a book somewhere. I can't remember what book, but it was a quote from an opera singer. And she was trying to teach someone else about opera singing. This is some famous opera singer. I'm not an opera person. I don't know who it was. And she says, "You must make the words like peaches in your mouth."
Ooh.
And I think about that when I'm writing constantly, because as I'm working on lyrics, I'll sing it to myself over and over and be like, how does this feel in my mouth? Is it like peaches?
Oh, that is so interesting. Wow. Well, I think this song has so much richness, from the gorgeously crafted wordsmithing to the way you strike a balance between story and metaphor, although I think we're learning now that it's a pretty literal story.
Less metaphor than I would have liked.
Yeah, but nevertheless, in terms of songcraft, it's not obvious or on the nose, nor is it so full of metaphor that we can't make sense of it. And even if we don't totally follow it on the first or fifth or 15th listen, I think we do understand at the core of the thing. We understand it at an instinctual level at its core. And if we want to put a little more work in as the listener, we can puzzle out all the richness and reap the rewards. I just feel like it's a pretty cool thing to accomplish in a song. And now that I know that this was a literal thing that happened to you, it's actually more impressive to me because, just because I feel like when something really amazing, that's amazing fodder for a song, that experience you had in your life, both this wild experience of love and, and collaboration and relationship and the actual literal twister. It's like all of that together is totally amazing. And as a songwriter, to me, it's very tempting to sort of to go in a little too literal about it. And somehow here you managed to turn it into something, I think maybe bigger, something very relatable. It wasn't so specific to your situation that now we can all relate to.
Yeah, good. Well, the one other thing, and I'm sure this might come up again, but I have a little bit of, like, I've been asked to teach songwriting, and I have a little resistance to that. And it's not because I don't want to, but just to share more about my experience as a writer. My process is quite, I'm trying to land on the right word here, subconscious. So for me, when I write a song, I often feel like I heard the song in a dream and I'm trying to remember it.
Interesting.
And this is a good example of that. So that experience happened. And then probably 2 days later, I was walking around New Orleans, a couple blocks from my house, and I literally just went, na 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 na, out of you now, mister, da 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 da, we're gonna lose it in the twister. And I was like, that's cool that mister rhymes with twister. And then like a couple hours later, I had written the whole song.
Wow.
And that's a fairly common experience for me, although I will add that I am a big editor. So I usually do a big dump of a full, like almost a whole song. And then I'll go through it iteratively over the weeks and like tweak little things till it feels done.
Yeah.
But so often the first part feels pretty like supernatural to me. Like I couldn't tell you how I started writing that song, except that thing happened, and then a couple days later I started writing that song. But it kind of like landed on me. I didn't feel like, oh, this would make a good song, you know?
Your songwriting process is kind of a twister.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And actually that's, you know, I was thinking about what we said earlier about how there's the political has almost replaced or supplanted the erotic in my life more recently. And I think that what they have in common is that they're these things that are bigger than us. And we don't really have any control over them. And yet we have to try to ride the wave and also try to exert any influence we can find on the wave. So like, I think the erotic has always felt like that to me, like a twister. Like, oh, like I'll meet someone and be like, uh-oh, here comes one. Like this one, it's rolling through town. Like you can nail everything down, but that's all you can do. You can't make it go away, you know?
Well, speaking of political, here's my segue into our next song. But it's my last thing to say about Twister. In addition to being, you know, sort of a sultry and fun tale of sin and consequence, there's such a smart and I think radical message at the heart of it. And maybe this is more about my read than your intent. But again, you know, I hear stop doing things that are bad for you. They're bad for you and you deserve better than that. And that actually brings us to your next song in which you literally sing about, you know, what it takes to have a better life. So now we will play that song, and it's the one you chose. It is After the Revolution from your brand new album of that same name.
So I
Again, that was After the Revolution, first track and title song from Carsie's brand new album. This is, I think, the right time to say I love this new album. And I'm saying this as a fan, not just because you're on my show. It's just one of those albums that feels fresh, fun. You just want to put it on and listen from start to finish and let the smart, satisfying experience wash over you. Every track's a gem. And for me as a fellow traveler, it feels like such a relief to have someone, speak the truths that are in my heart and, do it with such grace and enthusiasm. So,
Oh,
well
thank
done.
you.
Oh yeah, congrats. On a great
I
new
really
album.
like it too. I have to say, I've had many different experiences of releasing albums, and this one is like truly joyful. I'm stressed because there's a lot to do. There has been this past couple weeks, but I just listened to this album on my drive home from my bass player's house today, and I was like, I just really like it. I just really like this album. And I'm someone who doesn't like listening to myself, so for past albums, I haven't had that experience very much, and I find this one very listenable. It's like, there's no part that makes me cringe, which as the artist, is like
Oh my
pretty
God.
rare.
So rare.
Yeah.
For me, it's like maybe if I listen to it 40 times, eventually I can work through like, okay, it makes me cringe less now, this part.
Well, one thing, this is not songwriting related, so you can cut this later, but one thing I noticed listening to Twister, my voice used to be higher, and
yeah.
had found my own voice a lot harder to listen to until like it dropped. I got maybe a note and a half in the last 5 years or so, and so now I do enjoy
wow.
listening to my own voice more. So like listening back to Twister, I'm like, ooh, squeaky. Listening to this one, I'm like, yeah, get in there.
That's great. No, I won't cut that, and I'll
Okay.
tell you just a short story, which is, so this is I'm maybe a year into this podcast, and I love doing it. It's been, it's like I get to talk to people like you. It's such a delight for me. And I think my real hero, my interviewing hero, is Terry Gross. Maybe
yeah.
unsurprisingly, she's
She's good at it.
I think she's undeniably the GOAT. And I once heard someone interview her, and they asked, has she listened to her earlier work and what's it like listening to it? And Terry said, when I listened to the early stuff from, I forget which public university she was like, had a show, an interview show on their radio station. She said, when I listen to my early work, I feel like I sound like a feminist Minnie Mouse.
Totally.
That
I
was
feel
so,
the same.
yeah.
Or Betty Boop. Like listening to Twister, I'm like, oh, Betty Boop. Yeah.
That's great. So in a couple of years, once I'm a little bit deeper into the podcasting, I wonder what I'll look back and be like, oh, I sounded like I'm wondering what the fill in the blank will be.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so back to After the Revolution. So let's see. It's also so cool how you talked about, I love that you talked earlier about your various influences and, kind of your obsessive nature, the way you do deep dives into the things that you love. So, we've always gotten your folk stylings, jazz, the sort of punk and pop punk. I feel like this one, the first few songs, especially in this album, really bring the pop punk songwriter style. And I don't know, just what a lovely revolutionary anthem.
Oh, well, I love punk music and was like a punk teenager growing up in Virginia. But then as I got older, I found it to be like kind of too loud and it hurts my ears. Ow, ow. But I still really like the energy of punk rock. And I also am just blessed with this really versatile band. And so as we've played together over the years, we've kind of like added more styles that I feel we're able to master as a band. Not master, but I feel like we're able to really get across live as a band. And so punk and like heavy rock has been a newer thing for the band, and I've been writing to that ability more. I've always tried to write punk songs, but I feel like they didn't quite come across right until more recently. I had to like curate the right band.
Joe and Pat are your regular accomplices?
Joe plays bass, Pat plays keys. They've been with me a long time, like over a decade, both of them. And then Sean Trishka is our drummer, and he's a more recent addition, but is great. He's a great rock drummer. So that's probably part of why I wrote this song this way.
That's so cool. So I like the first line, "You and me by the warming sea, buying something in a bag." Right away with the warming sea, you situated us, in our present climate crisis. And then the phrase "buying something in a bag" is so good.
Oh, thank you.
It's so good. I mean, they say a picture paints 1,000 words. I think here a phrase paints 1,000 pictures. We all have that experience in late stage consumer capitalism. What am I buying? Something in a bag.
Yeah.
Almost
Doesn't matter.
It almost doesn't matter what it is. We're just going through the motions, buying things we probably don't need that aren't
Putting them in
particularly good for us. What else are we going to do?
Yeah. Yeah, that one, it's funny. That line came together kind of in a funny order to me. I had You and Me by the see. Hadn't filled in warming yet. Buying something in a bag. That was like just a phrase that felt good to me, so it kind of came out. You and me by the sea, buy something in a bag. And I kind of was bouncing it around for a while. And then when I thought of warming, I was like, that's what it is. Because then it creates to me a contradiction, because you have a petroleum product in your hand and you're at the sea that is warming.
Didn't even catch
and
it.
Kind of, oh, good. Well, I don't think it has to be caught consciously, because I think in a way you did catch it, because it's the experience of consumer capitalism is like, there's global warming, and you feel that you're participating in some abstract way all the time, and it kind of creates this rubbing all the time of like, what, I wish we could stop doing this. But so I think that opening line for me set up that uneasiness. That's really what the whole song is about.
Yeah. Yep, totally. Okay, so I also like the beginning of the second line, walking through the war to the corner store. I like it because I don't think you're talking about a war in the traditional sense. For years, I have been saying that capitalism is a war on poor and working people in particular. I mean, ultimately, it's a war on all of us. My sense is that you're saying something similar here, that wherever you live in the world, our collective situation is dire, like is a war zone of one kind or another. Is that the case?
Totally. Yeah, you could even call it a class war.
Let's.
Yeah, and I think so that setup for that song is not like drawn from a particular actual event in my life, but I was trying to paint a pretty specific picture of kind of like being in a tourist town as a vacationer, going out buying products and kind of not being able to enjoy, the ocean, or like being on vacation because you're surrounded all the time by like the collapse of society.
Yeah.
Because I have experiences like that pretty often where I'm like, this is supposed to be fun. Why do I feel bad?
Totally.
And it's kind of the corrosive influence of becoming a little bit class conscious, I guess, is how you could say it. Once you start to be conscious of things like class and also of capitalism and of global warming, it's like that consciousness itself can really corrode your experience, and make it hard to have like pure pleasure and joy and love and stuff like that. And that's really what I'm trying to get across in the song. And the other line, and this is a line I'm very proud of. I don't know if you were going to talk about this anyway, but the line in the second verse, it's hard to love like you won't give up when the whole thing's coming down.
Go ahead.
That's one of my favorite lines in the song, and it sort of does the same dichotomy. It's like, it's so hard to just live and experience our lives when we're surrounded by this feeling of collapse.
Yeah, I love hearing you talk about this. It's true. So many of us have this experience either awarely or unawarely, and there's so little conversation about how you weather it, how you lead a good life, how you take the big stands that are necessary while at the same time not succumbing to the sort of the misery that I think so many of those movements get stuck in. It's like they're hard things. How do you not feel so hard about them? This song does such a sweet job of, steering away through those icebergs.
Good. I really wanted with this album to get to a place of hope, but to feel like I had earned it. And for me, that means acknowledging what's true.
Yeah.
So like the first couple tracks on this album are in some way are the most ideologically challenging. And I wanted to sequence it that way because I wanted people to have to go through them to get to a track like Hope, where it's like, okay, now just like feel good for a minute, because we've gone ahead and acknowledged the elephants in the room, which are like, we're living in a world that's falling apart and it's scary.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so moving on to the fourth line, and I know it all couldn't be your fault, but I need someone to blame. I felt like you were pointing out that, in a world that puts profits before people's lives, we get pitted against each other, including our closest people, and end up, turning on each other instead of uniting against the forces of oppression. Is that what
Yeah.
you're saying here?
Totally. And this one is a little more drawn from life too, because I do have, actually not as much anymore. My husband and I used to have like a recurring conflict, which is basically he's a lot better with money than me, and he comes from a much more traditional family than me. And so, which isn't to say he's at all like mainstream or centrist or on the right. He's actually quite far to the left, but maybe like one click less far than I am. And so we'll get in the stupidest arguments where it's like I'm blaming him as a representative of the entire, all white men with money or whatever. Not even that he like has money, quote unquote, but he has like a little more money than me. So I think, yeah, it creates this dichotomy where you're so full of rage and anguish. It's like you have to send it somewhere. And often we just send it to the closest place, which is like the people we love the most.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, that leads us right to the chorus where you say, "You'll be a better husband, I'll be a better wife." One of those lyrics that, I don't know, it's like, has anyone ever sung that before? It's like, it's aspirational, it's sort of generous and sweet. It's like subtly radical, I think. The idea that if we make a better world, we solve a lot of the problems that face us in our relationships. Our struggles are not actually personal failings because the
Yes.
fights we're engaged in are not fair fights. And the oppressive
Yes.
society has set us up to struggle with being good to each other in these basic ways.
Yes, completely. And it's also just so true. Like that's something I think about a lot now that I've come to the part of my political development where I spend a lot of time thinking about what the world could be like. I often think about like, oh, wouldn't it be great if, we lived in villages and there was free healthcare and free childcare and free education, and like you could just drop your kid off at the local whatever and somebody would be there to hang out with them. And so many of those kinds of essentially public projects, public good projects have the impact of making your personal relationships work a lot better, because it's almost impossible for two individual people to like raise children in capitalism. I mean, it will drive you insane. I'm not doing it. You're doing it. You know what it's like.
Indeed.
I have a lot of a lot of friends who are doing it. It's like there's not enough money, there's not enough time, there's not enough support, there's not enough help.
Yeah.
And how you're supposed to then survive a marriage in that context is like, it's kind of insane. It's a big ask. And so I think I was thinking about that as I wrote this song. Like, you know what? This isn't our fault.
Yeah. It's like I feel like it's a big task to. This is a complicated conversation, right? Like this is not a straightforward thing. And back to the earlier piece about how we don't have many conversations in common anymore. It's like no one's talking about this really. Is the way I feel. And so to address it in a song and to not be really on the nose about it, it's like to sort of, again, I think you've done this in a way where even if we're not aware of the conversation, you feel something about it
Good.
intrinsically. And since I am aware of this conversation, I especially enjoyed the way that you were, sort of laying it out so poetically.
Good. If I could drop a quick recommendation, do you listen to the Upstream podcast?
No.
It's one
That
of my
sounds
favorite
familiar.
like left politics podcasts. It's an interview with authors, usually authors of books on the left, and they just had Kristen Godsey on, who wrote a book called Why Women Have Better Sex Under Socialism.
I've been reading about your posts
Yeah.
on this. Yes.
Oh, good, yeah.
Continue.
Which is a really splashy title. It's really about kind of not just women and sex, but also everything related to reproduction. So like how childcare and healthcare and relationships, like romantic relationships, have been different under various socialist experiments. And it's super interesting. And I just was listening to the podcast the other day with her and was thinking about this song because it does actually make people better husbands and better wives in some cases. She talked about in the Soviet Union, there were these things called milk bars, which was every neighborhood had a little restaurant, which is basically subsidized by the government to offer food at cost, but they would cook it for you and they would do the dishes.
Wow.
And so parents with young children would almost every night for dinner go to the milk bar because you don't want to have to clean up your kitchen and you don't want to have to go buy food at the grocery store because you don't have time. And that was one of the most popular policies in the history of the Soviet Union. And in fact, many of the countries that used to be part of the USSR have since tried to bring back milk bars, but it's very hard to do in a capitalist model.
Wow. That's so interesting. I am going to get that book, and I'll link to it in the show notes for everybody else who wants to read it.
Great.
Oh, cool. All right. My last thing I want to tease out in this song is in the bridge, you say, "My granddad fought at Leningrad when they all knew what was fair." Are you referring to the 1941 siege of Leningrad in the Second World War? And did your granddad indeed fight in that?
No, he didn't. Although, so my granddad actually joined the Navy in, I think, March of 1945. So he was about to go to Europe to fight Nazis, and then the war ended.
Wow. Okay.
So incredibly lucky, really.
Yeah.
No, but I was trying to get a sense of the feeling that there was sort of a bygone era when there was like a fight between good and evil, and also when you could go fight fascists on a battlefield, and and now it feels different. It feels like the war is everywhere. Like we're all kind of in this saturated state where there's a war happening, but there's no front line. There's nowhere you can go to fight it.
Right. Kind of back to the Chomsky quote a little bit. What was the quote again that you said?
The quote, Chomsky said something like, "We don't have to have state-censored speech because there's certain things you're not allowed to think."
Right. It's a little bit like we don't have to have war on a battlefield because you're living it inside yourself and your community day after day.
Yeah, that's a great way of saying it. Yeah, and it's like in the first verse, walking through the war to the corner store. It's like if you live in an American city right now and you want to go for a walk in your city, you're literally going to have to step over homeless people. And like that is a little like being on a battlefield.
Yeah. Right.
But like we said, it's like there's nowhere to go to fight. You can't like join up and go shoot the bad guys, you know?
Right. Interesting. So I guess the last thing I'm curious about in that phrase is when you say, when they all knew what was fair. What did you mean there?
So that verse is a little complicated because it gets into like communism and fascism and like the historical fights between them. So World War II was historically unique in many ways, and one of them was that the Americans became allied with the communists to fight the Nazis.
Right.
And so theoretically, if my granddad had gone to fight in Leningrad, which he wouldn't have, but it was kind of this theoretical situation, like back when America was on the right side of history,
right,
for this one brief period during World War II,
right,
we all knew what was fair. And now it's sort of like we're constantly backing whatever regime will sell the most oil, and it has nothing to do with morality, if it ever did, which I don't really think it did. I think we just thought the Nazis were about to lose.
Right.
But yeah, it's kind of just pointing to that feeling of there may have been a time in history when this was a simpler problem. And now it's an extremely complex problem.
That's really interesting. All right. Well, to finish out our show, maybe that was an awkward transition. Actually, I'm sorry. I meant to say, did you have anything else to say about After the Revolution?
Man, I really love how the production came out on this song. I know this is a songwriting podcast, so I won't go too deep into it. But
please, go ahead.
Well, making records has gotten to be a bigger and bigger project. This is my 9th album. And every time it's like there's a little more money, there's a little more access to like people that I want to work with. And this one was like, we certainly didn't have an unlimited budget, but it was really the first time I had enough money to do it the way I actually wanted to do it.
That's great.
And this song is the one where you can hear it the most. So there's a full string section.
Yeah.
There's a guitar player who's doing like a Radiohead thing.
Totally.
And it just sounds so huge.
I was just going to say, it sounds huge.
And it took a long time to put it together. Like it was many steps to record it and then many steps to mix it and master it. And it's almost like this is the first time I've like had my vision come to fruition. So like when I wrote the song, this is what I was imagining, and it actually came out this way, and it's like so satisfying.
Wow, good for you. It's like it is such a swelling emotional auditory experience, just in
Yeah.
terms of the aesthetic sound of it, all these things that you're talking about, to listen to. It just feels like an anthem.
Yeah, good. Well, hopefully a Marvel movie will buy it, and then I can always make records the way I want forever after that.
Hell yeah. If you're out there listening, head of whatever studio that is.
Marvel, yeah.
Yeah, Marvel. Whoever owns Marvel.
Yeah. It's probably still Jeff Bezos.
Oh, yeah, probably.
Somehow. Anyway.
So it goes. Well, to finish out the show, we'll each share one cool thing, something that's piqued your interest, or even something you've been mildly obsessed with that you think our listeners might enjoy. You want to go first or me?
Sure, I can go first. I came across this great little book that came out a few months ago called It's Not You, It's Capitalism. And it is an illustrated, fun-to-read little guide about capitalism and how it works, and socialism and how that works, written by a very funny and very good writer named Malika Jabali. And I liked it so much that I actually sent it out with some of my pre-orders for this album. Because that was where some of the extra budget went, is I was like, let's just buy some of these books and send them out.
Oh my God.
And I really like it. It's very accessible. So like if you have a friend who is always like, what's all this nonsense about socialism? You can give them the book and they can read that without like getting a PhD first.
Awesome. It sounds great. I'll link to that in the show notes, and I look forward to getting a copy myself. Well, this month, my one cool thing is the Instagram account of Adrienne Marie Brown, who, Carsie, I'm guessing you follow?
Yes.
Yeah.
I actually sent her book out too with some of the records.
Oh, hell
That's so
yeah.
fun.
That's great. Yeah, I feel like you two vibrate on a very similar frequency.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, Adrienne Marie Brown, she is a songwriter, essayist, poet, podcaster, Black liberation leader. I mean, it's a long list. She might be most well known for something she calls pleasure activism, which is interesting, inspiring, and rooted in ideas of radical human liberation. Carsie, I once heard you say that the tradition of protest music is about making protest vital and fun. I think I said this already earlier in the show. It's bad editing of mine, but anyway, you did say that. Vital and fun and joyful and sexy. You said most people aren't enrolled by being scolded, and I feel like Adrienne Marie Brown, much like you, is great at this. And anyhow, her Instagram posts are a collection of like mostly memes and videos where she's amassed little snippets of joy and perspective and hilarity and culture that cut through the doom scrolling and remind me how, if we're thought about it, even social media can really enrich our lives. So
Totally.
I'll link to her.
I think she is the popularizer of that quote from Tony Cade Bombera, the role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible.
Oh,
that
God.
was like I think that's on the first page of Pleasure Activism, her book. And I remember reading it and like writing it in all my notebooks for the last like 5 or 6 years.
That's wonderful. Well, Carsie Blanton, such a pleasure having you on the show.
Pleasure's mine. This was a wonderful interview. Thank you so much.
Oh, good. You are welcome. Well, you can find everything Carsie Blanton at carsieblanton.com, including tour dates, the new album on vinyl. It's got a great cover, and so it'll look especially nice. I'm going to get myself a copy, but I haven't yet, on that large format vinyl. T-shirts, a songbook. You can even buy a necklace that says, Ugly Nasty Commie Bitch, which is the title of one of Carsie's viral songs. It's a very pretty necklace, in spite of those ugly words. And to that end, Carsie says, it's so subtly subversive, you can wear it to PTA meetings or to church. I'll put Carsie's website and other links in the show notes. I'm Mohammed Seven. You can find me at mohammed7.com. That's MUHAMMAD and SEVEN like the number. There you can find my music and tour dates, as well as how to get in touch if you're interested in songwriting, coaching, or lessons, which I offer. Again, you can become a patron via the link in the show notes or by searching Mohammed Seven Patreon. If you'd like to ask a question about songwriting and have my guest and I talk about it on the show, you can send those to me via social media message or email. Just check the link tree for those things. Many thanks to Outside Providence, who left this review of the show on Apple Podcasts titled, Not Just for Songwriters. They said, intimate conversations about songwriting, personal, philosophical, probing, sometimes political. I love the depth of the questions and the introspective thoughtfulness of the conversations. Each interview thus far has introduced perspectives of art and self that leave me with a greater understanding of the unfolding of songwriting and the songwriter. Well, lovely review. Thank you so much, Outside Providence. I appreciate you singing our praises. I'll leave you today with a quote from Woody Guthrie, who said, "This song is copyrighted in the United States under seal of copyright number 154,285 for a period of 28 years, and anybody caught singing it without our permission, well, will be a mighty good friend of ours, because we don't give a darn. Publish it, write it, sing it, swing to it, yodel it. We wrote it, and that's all we wanted to do."
Oh, that's so good.
All right. I'll see you back here next time on We Flew Off the Page.